Uh, what I'll be doing today is two parts. Usually, my colleague Samuel Cortez, Dr. Samuel Cortez, and I present this segment of the training. But today, I am going to do both on his behalf. So first off, here he is, Sam, who's not available today, but I'm on his behalf, and this is me, Mohsin and Shaikh. And Bilal has, Sabir and Bilal have already mentioned you are already using chat, so ask questions there if you have any immediate ones, and we'll try to answer. Or you can always email us. There is a help desk email, and if you have a particular topic, you can always email us on that. So the agenda for these segments is that we are going to talk about the access to Shaheen. Then we'll very briefly move to managing your files. Most of the stuff Bilal has already talked about, so we're not going to get involved too much in that. It would be just a repetition. But we'll jump to submitting and monitoring our computation on Shaheen. And then at the end, we're going to see how to use software that are pre-installed on Shaheen. And also we'll talk a little bit about how to connect from Windows if you are using a Windows machine. So how to access Shaheen? Let's move on to that. And after me, when I'm finished with my spiel, Dr. Ziangzu and Dr. Ruhuram are going to talk about community-specific codes, for example, VASP and ANSYS, how to run them on Shaheen. Once we are done with this, Dr. Bilal Hadri is going to come back and talk about the programming environment on Shaheen. How do you interact with compilers and the libraries? And at the end, if Sam was here, he would have spoken a little bit about his tools, but Sam has also done quite a lot of development, in-house development, which actually helps people break down their large high throughput workflows and automate Slurm submissions. So if someone is interested, please ping us through email and then we can go through that. Okay.
Mohsin, can you put it full screen? Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I'm coming. All right. Is it full screen now?
Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. So accessing Shaheen. As Sabir mentioned, from a very high level, you have got these login nodes, and then there is a gateway node, and then you have got a bunch of compute nodes with file system mounted on them. When you use your workstation, you're only going to use an SSH session to get onto the machine, and you will never interact directly with this system except for the login node. So as Sabir mentioned, we've got over 6,000 compute nodes, which are cumulatively around 2,000 cores. And we have got 3 login nodes. Actually, we've got 4 login nodes, but 3 are general purpose. And these are the first point of interaction with Shaheen for any user, including us, this computation science team. You will log in from your machine to these login nodes. And these login nodes are of a specific purpose. So they are to log in, obviously, and they are to compile your code. If you're compiling a source code, for example, they are to submit your jobs and monitor your jobs. They're nothing to do with other than these 4 bullet points because it is being monitored, and this is a shared resource. And if you run computation here on these login nodes, it will affect everyone who is involved. And these are hundreds of people using these login nodes at a time. Logging in is load balanced. So wherever you land in these 3 login nodes, it doesn't really matter. The environment is the same, okay? And everything is available there. So as I mentioned, login nodes is how you interact with Shaheen. Once you have created an account, you can log in. You log into Shaheen via SSH or Secure Shell. For that, you need a terminal or SSH client. to run the SSH command. And as credentials, you will be using your username and password. If you're from Faust, you will have it as your IT username and password. And if you're an external, you will get that created. In addition to that, this is a two-factor authentication method. So you need another layer of authentication. It is a one-time password, and I'll explain it a little bit to you in a couple of slides. So here's an example. Our good friend Zeong is trying to log in, and he uses SSH command. And I'll explain to you what this -x is. And then this is his username, @ this is his target host name that he's going to. This is a common host name for all the login nodes. Okay, so depending on where the load is less, you will be directed to that login node automatically. And once successful, this is the kind of screen on terminal that you will see, some policy statement, and then it will ask you your OTP or one-time password. This is the second layer of authentication. Once you're in, there will be a message of the day, and then you will see your prompt. And the prompt constitutes your username at the login node that you are in. Okay. So as I mentioned before, your username and password, if you're from Faust, is your usual IT username and password that you use in Portal, your Outlook, and so on and so forth. And the second layer is the OTP. If you're external, obviously that's created for you. The username and password is created for you. Okay. So for OTP, as I mentioned before, the one-time password is required. And for that, you need an authenticator. You can download the authenticator on your phone as an app. It comes as a as an Android app as well as an iPhone app, iOS app. So you can do that. And basically, you punch in the numbers, and it gets refreshed after a certain time lag. I think it is 30 seconds. And then if the first one that is red is not working, this probably is the old one. Then at the 30th second, it will refresh, and a new one will come up, and then you use that. There is a certain number of tries that you can do, after which the account is blocked for a certain amount of time, after which it is reactivated for you to try again. So there are maximum number of tries that you can do at best in one time. So remember your username and password, and then this is the OTP that you use. For OTP applications, you've got 3 obvious choices here. And then you can visit our website for getting the initial seed as well. So this is provided by the systems teams to you. This is provided with the systems teams to you, and as QR code. You can use this QR code to actually create the OTP in Google Authenticator, OTP Auth, or free OTP. Okay. Right. A word of caution: never share your password with anyone. And basically, this can create all sorts of problems, because basically you consent to a few policy statements that you need to adhere to from our side. Keep changing that often, because this has vulnerability. And it is a good practice to change this occasionally anyways. And IT also asks you to change your password as well. So if any questions about logging in, I think there are quite a few.
Yeah, I have
Okay.
a question.
Sure, go ahead, please.
So, so you said that the password is the same as my login password to Portal and anywhere else.
Yeah.
Is it possible to change my password to log into Shaheen only for that? I mean,
good question.
No.
Guys, any answer?
Yes, no, you cannot, because your password is the same for your email. If you are a Faust user,
yeah,
You cannot change it, or you can change it, but
I
it
can,
will
yeah.
affect all your Wi-Fi, your everything.
Yeah.
External user, since they have only access to Shaheen, yes, they can change it, and they have to change it. I think every year. Our specialist, I see Wijden is here. She will reply to us and will share the steps. But as a Cast
So
user, if you are
yeah.
Cast, you cannot change just for Cast, just for Shaheen. Sorry.
So very apt answer, Bilal. And the short answer is no. The long answer to that is the reason why we can't change it is, as Bilal mentioned, it is common everywhere. And the reason for that is there is something called Active Directory or LDAP, and we do not create our own or maintain our own database. We hook into ITs. So essentially for authentication, first layer of authentication. And that's why you can't just change the password here because it needs to be changed on the IT side in order for us to authenticate from there. Does it answer the question?
Yes. Thank you very much.
No problem. Anything else before we move on? Okay. So
Hi,
yeah,
sorry.
go
Sorry
ahead.
for interrupting. I wanted to ask about well, I'm an external user, and actually sometimes I need to access Shaheen, not from home or from university, maybe along the way using mobile data. So this is not possible because I don't know the IP address for or the IP range for the mobile data. So
Okay.
what's the solution for this problem?
Okay. So what you need is a VPN connection from outside, and basically creating a VPN connection has a consequence as if you were in Ghost, okay, on the network. So you don't need anything else. Wherever you are from, it is a cocoon. It is an encapsulation of a network, and then it actually abstracts everything and makes you think that you are inside. Makes your computer think that you are inside, and the IP addresses uh, will be honored. So I think
And
there is
and
enough.
and as an external user, am I allowed to have a VPN account, and how can I do that?
So the response for the VPN. VPN is not granted to like by it's
Not
managed
yet.
by IT. Is not granted for all. However, if you are on your mobile or your work or at home, the sysadmin can add your address IP. Sorry. So I understand that you don't know what is your address IP. You have two ways to know your address IP. First is trying to connect to Shaheen, and you will see an email. Okay, I can't connect. Then you can just send this email to help and you say, can you please allow temporarily this IP address? Or you go to Google and you say, what is my IP? And he will give you your IP address.
But this is only for this session, and I need to repeat these steps every time I do that. All right?
It depends on your dynamic
Yeah,
IP
usually
address.
it changes. Yes, it's
Yes.
dynamic. Yeah,
Or as
definitely.
like
Hello.
Mohsin mentioned, is if you have a VPN. I think like probably like which then will be
Yes,
able like to answer us
yes,
about the
Mr. Ali.
VPN. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Wisdom.
about the IP, we can do the extend. We can extend the range of your IP. So it will take maybe some time, but at the end we can know what is your IP range. So maybe you can send an email to us, and we can follow up on your request.
But VPN is not possible for me. Yeah.
Actually, we can try, but this is will be a difficult way because you are just using Shaheen, right?
Yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not from Kaust. I'm from YouTube. Yeah.
And the also the VPN is not even us as a user. Like if I go to another place outside my home, I do the same like you. I try to add my IP address because the VPN is so slow. So it's not
Yes,
Okay.
ideal.
you're
It's,
right.
Yeah.
yes.
I
So
believe.
that's why like we advise you to get your IP. And of course, if you do it during the business day, it is done in few minutes. So we have like a great team of sysadmins, which then is among them. And
Yeah.
within the business hour, like from 8 to 5, the people will answer you very quickly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
welcome.
so much.
All
I have
right.
question.
Yes, please.
Does using Shaheen computer for people outside the coast have the same advantages?
When you are on Shaheen, basically it doesn't really matter whether you are external or from within Coast. If you have an account, if you have been allocated the hours in whatever policy, as Bilal mentioned, whether it is development or production, you have all the things available that are available to everyone else.
Thank you. I got it.
Okay, so accessing Shaheen from Windows. The first thing is for full instructions, you can actually go to that link and follow the steps there. What it basically talks about is that how to log into Shaheen from Windows, where to get the terminal application or the SSH client application from, and how to use that via SSH, how to move files, and then graphical output, how to enable X11 Windows, X Windows on your machine when you're working. So we will go through these things step by step. One tool that is really handy to have for Windows users as a SSH client is a tool that has been promoted by software carpentry. It's called Git Bash, and then you can watch a video how to install it on your machine there on a YouTube link. And it looks something like this, where you have the whole IDE. When you SSH into a machine, you can actually do multiple things, including a terminal and a file browser. And this is a desktop version, which actually gives you a command line interface of the tool, and you can use SSH and interact with Shaheen when you're logged in, right? And it is open source. You don't need a license for that. So essentially, when Git Bash is installed, it will appear in your application browser, and you can interactively start a terminal. Once you have started it, you can use the SSH command, as was said before, with SSH-y, which actually enables the X11 forwarding, and then the username at shaheen.hpc.couch.au, and it will ask for the password. Once you have punched in the password, it will go to the next layer of authentication, that is one-time password. Remember that when you're typing the password, it will not show anything here. So don't think that you're not writing. Basically, it is being written. It just doesn't show the characters that you are writing or the typing, because it defeats the purpose. Somebody else might be looking at the screen and then noting down what you're writing. Okay, so this is the page that I mentioned before, and Dr. Sam has aptly maintained it for Windows users. So you can go there and do the step-by-step installation of your SSH client. It also includes how to install X Windows Server on your machine. And for X Windows Server, basically what it is used for is, basically, for example, if you are opening a GUI and you want to see it, it's supposed to be enabled so that both machines are connected for graphics transport between the two machines. Okay, and for Mac, you need something called Xquad, which gives you the X window system. And when getting ready to SSH into Shaheen, Xquad should be running on your machine before you can pass this X11 Windows system to your target host. That is your login node. And this -y, -x for Linux and -y for Mac, in Mac and Windows is required as a flag to pass the X11, which basically connects you to the login nodes. Okay. There are instructions, both video and text instructions. There are plenty of them. It doesn't have to be from KSL. So go through these. There are a few options here where you can actually either download Xming, the X11 server, on your computer and install it using the YouTube video assistance if you want. Another option is using PuTTY. PuTTY is a SSH client which comes batteries included. So basically you install it and then everything is in there. This is primarily for Windows users. It comes as an MSI installer as well as a prepackaged ready binary, which you double click. Basically, you don't have to install it. You double click and then the SSH client starts. And then you can set up your SSH session here. So here, basically, this slide shows you go to the SSH tab and then start adding your host name. And you can also enable X11 from this session while expanding this session. While expanding this tab, you can actually see that you can actually forward or enable X11 from there too. Okay, so these are the two choices, Git Bash and PuTTY, to actually get your SSH client while you're using Windows. Any questions about that?
Yeah, so I don't know what X11 is, and I normally log into Shaheen without typing -x or -y.
It's perfectly fine. If you don't need it, you don't have to do it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So if there are no further questions about Windows SSH client, I can move on to talk about job scheduling and on Shaheen. And for job scheduling, first, let's talk about what job schedulers are for. So we have 6,000 nodes. That's fantastic. And we have a lot of users, and many users ask for different number of nodes to use all at the same time. We cannot give interactive on the spot, on demand requested allocation to everyone. And these jobs may last from a few seconds to a few hours, or even the whole day. 24 hours is the maximum that we can allow for a job to run. This becomes a complex situation. So what schedulers are used for is they maintain queues and then they can allow more work submitted than the resources available. So that when the resource is available, the stuff that is in the queue, the job that is in the queue has been picked from there and then will be used on those nodes that are available at that time. You don't have to be there. That's another catch there. So you may need to change your workflow a little bit, adapt your workflow a little bit, especially automate your workflow through scripting to have that advantage of queuing your jobs and then forgetting about it. Come back tomorrow morning, the job will finish, and then you will see your results. As I mentioned, Shaheen is a large machine, and schedulers give this very nice way of managing a fair share between everyone. And the queues have a few limits, a few constraints. And the first constraint is 24 hours. Basically, there is a debug queue as well. So if you don't know whether your script is ready or not, you can actually get a debug queue and then spend a few minutes on that to check whether the scripts are okay, and then you start submitting. If in extenuating circumstances, some codes need more time to run than 24 hours, there's a special queue for that, which is provided upon access to it is upon request. That is called 72-hour queue, and maximum of 512 nodes are shared on that. So we use Slurm as a resource manager or scheduler. It supports complex scheduling algorithms, and what it does is it gives you how to describe the resource request and submit it. It also allows you to prescribe when the resource is available, how to use it. Then you can monitor your jobs through Slurm as well. And then there is an accounting part that we use for charging you for your job. And these are the core hours that Bilal was talking about, are deducted from using Slurm. So querying system resources, these are a few commands that I'm going to introduce, so how to interact with Slurm. So the first important command is basically what is on the system and what's the state of the system. And sinfo is actually that command that gives you a concise output of how many nodes are there, how many are allocated, how many are idle, so that you can see how busy is the machine and why my job is pending for so long or not, right? It shows quite a few things, but it doesn't show who is running. So for that, we use sq. Sq is another command which basically shows the state of the whole queue. And if you type sq, you will get a long list of all the people who are in different states, all the jobs who are in different states, right? Here you can use some filters. You can actually filter the output by your username, by the partition that you are querying for, or by the job ID. So it will just be information about that job ID that you are interested in. Okay. Next is specifying resource. Once you know what the system is, how do I ask for resource? Well, everything is pooled in queues. And there are two important queues that you need to know of on Shaheen. One is called the work queue, that is the production queue for 24 hours, and then 72 hours are also given in that. The other one is debug queue, right? So this is a short-lived queue for prototyping, debugging, and checking your scripts. What can you request as resource? You can request the number of CPUs or number of nodes. You can request the memory. You can request the burst buffer. You can request the amount of time for which you need these resources. You will need to, so there are two ways you can request this. One is you can write up a script step by step, what is supposed to be done. You submit this to the scheduler, Slurm, and then when the resources are available that you have asked for in that script, these commands that you have lined in will be run on your behalf. That's called a batch job, right? So you basically write up a whole script with the resource request and the commands to run when the request is available inside a script, and then you submit it to Slurm, and then you go home, basically, right? You don't need to be there. And then when the jobs are running, the allocation has been activated, then your lines of command will run on those jobs, right? There's another mode that is interactive. So sometimes you may want to do some prototyping, some debugging. These are usually small and short, as for example in debug queue you will run. And you can actually get a small resource request allocated to you, and the prompt is given to you, and then you actually do line by line command, type the command line by line and see what is happening or what is failing, or fix it basically. So interactive jobs are really handy to actually get to your final script that you can submit as a batch job. Here is an example of a job script on Shaheen. So the first part is requisition to Slurm, what you want, and things like which account should this be charged to, what job, what the name of the job will be in the queue, for example, for you to understand which job is running what, how long you want it for. This is the wall time. The partition or the queue I was talking about, it's work queue. You're asking the job to run in work queue. How many CPUs, how many cores you want the job to run with, for example. And then a few other hints. And then this is a special parameter called data warp. So if you're using burst buffer, as Bilal mentioned, special type of file system for very high IO needs, specialized IO needs, then you can actually add that to as the resource request. Once that request is given to your job, that means once that request is available and your job is allocated on that resource, these lines will run on your behalf. So it will load the WASP environment, for example. It will bring WASP in the environment, and then it will run the WASP application on 64 cores, right? For this script to be submitted to Slurm, you need a command called sbatch and then your script name. So let's have a look at what sbatch does. Upon successful submission, it gives you a job ID. And then that job ID is queued and waits for the allocation to for the allocation of the resources that were requested in the job script. When the allocation starts, accounting comes into play, and when the job is submitted, accounting comes into play. And there is a priority that is assigned to it, depending on how much you have used and what's left, for example, in your account. And then your job will be prioritized in the whole database of jobs. In general, shorter and smaller jobs are easier to schedule for the scheduler. Longer and larger jobs are a bit difficult, given if the resource is scarce. That means if the resource is less, then scheduler might actually schedule it for a later time. But that depends on the nature of the job. If you have submitted a job and for some reason you want to kill the job, you don't want it to run, or you don't want a running job to finish and eat up your core hours, you can always use scancel to cancel your job. You can cancel your job using the job ID. In order to get the job ID, what you can do is you can first run sq with your filter minus your username, and this is the job ID that you get. Then you can use that job ID to cancel. Okay. The next one is salloc. So remember I mentioned a batch job versus interactive job. I mentioned that sbatch was the way to submit a batch job. salloc is the counterpart for interactive job submission. So say, for example, you have a script that you would like to test before you run it on very large count, right? So what you would do is you want to ask for 2 nodes on debug queue. salloc will give that to you. And as it mentions, granted job allocation. So this means that the allocation has been granted on what you have asked for. So you have 2 nodes of 32 core each, that is 64 cores. You run your launcher, job launcher, which runs this application called Hello World on 64 cores, and it will spit out the output on your screen. And you can decide whether it is doing what it's supposed to do or something needs to change. Once you're done with it, you type exit, and you're outside this interactive allocation. Okay, so when you're allocated, whether in batch job or interactive job, your resource request is allocated, you can use the allocated resource in different ways. You can configure it. So here, for example, I'm asking for 2 nodes. But what I want is I want to run an MPI application, a parallel application that is hybrid. That means it understands both MPI and shared memory, that is OpenMP. So this is exactly what I'm doing with my srun command after the allocation has happened. Okay. So srun is a really handy launcher, job launcher, which allows you to configure how you want to run your application once your job has allocated. So salloc and sbatch are supposed to give you the resource that has been requested. Once that is the request has been allocated, you can move on and use srun to use that in different ways. Okay. Here is an example of a multi-step job where you are asking for some resource for some amount of time. Once that resource is given to you, you first run your first step that may actually be a pre-processing step. And then once that is finished, then you run srun again with a different number of CPUs and different number of MPI tasks and different number of CPUs for multi-threading. And then you run another application parallel step. Okay. Once your jobs are running or your jobs have finished, how do you know what is the state of the jobs? So that's monitoring. And how do you know how much it has eaten up from your allocation? SQ, as I mentioned before, is the first query on the job basis that you can do. You can also use your username to list all the jobs that are in the queue at the moment in any state. And it will list all the jobs that are associated to you. ST or state is a very important flag that you need to see. PD means pending, and then R means they are running at the moment, they are in progress. PD and then the reason of the pending, why it is pending, is also of consequence. So there can be different reasons. You can actually look at the man page or manual page of SQ to look at what that actually means. If you don't understand, email us and then we'll explain it to you. Scontrol is a Slurm command or Slurm utility, which basically spits out all the information about the job that is in current, live, whether in pending state or in running state. Once it is finished, you cannot query using this command for that job. But during the flight, during the progress, during the lifetime of the job, you can query how it was submitted, where it was submitted from, what resources did it ask for. This is a really handy output to have in your Slurm output, especially when you're running batch jobs and you're running, let's say, 1,000 jobs. How do you know what you asked for? So this is a very handy way of capturing the information in your output for provenance purpose. So you can go back and then pinpoint, this is the way I ran that job. Okay. sact is a very useful utility for accounting. So basically you can see after the job has finished, how it was allocated, what resources were asked for, and there's quite a lot of information you can retrieve back from sact on a job basis, on a user basis, or even on a partition basis. Okay. So this is a concise output of sact for job 121 blah, blah, blah. But there is a long form as well, and then you can use -L for that to get all the matrix that sact captures. So now on to example job scripts. So here we are running an OpenMP code, which is a shared memory application, which uses multiple cores on the same node or one node. Okay. And here I'm asking for 4 cores and I'm using it for 4 OpenMP threads. And OMP num threads, for those who understand OpenMP, this may actually reverberate. This is how we run an OpenMP application. Here is an MPI application example. and we want 32 MPI tasks to be launched to launch this MPI application. And we ask for n tasks equal 32, and then we pass that to our command line on srun. And again, this is a job script, so you will submit this job script using sbatch. Here is a hybrid example. Again, we're asking for 32 tasks, but we want for each task to have 4 cores for OpenMP. So in total, you will be given 32 times 4 cores, which can be on multiple nodes, which will be on multiple nodes. So this application understands hybrid parallelism, and it will see this resource and will use that resource. Again, if you are interested in knowing more how to use burst buffers, here is an example, but you can actually email us to go through how to run this kind of workflow in more detail, one-on-one. So this ends my session about job scheduling. Now let's move on to particular use cases. And the first one is Dr. Zeong. I think we'll do a Q&A on the job scheduling at the end in the interest of time. So Zeong, over to you.